Welcome to Pondering Pandas, a podcast where we ponder about the confusing modern world and try to make sense of it all. We are your host. My name is Jayden.
My name is Ryan.
What's our topic today?
So today I really want to talk about the debt. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this word.
Debt?
Yeah, debt.
Are we talking about negative money? You're talking about negative money.
Yeah, that the money we owed. I'm not sure how to
Hmm.
put this because that's for me it's very personal level because I live in China before I moved to the Western society. So I just noticed
Right.
uh, the debt culture is very different.
Is
I
it?
When I moved here, I just realized people are very used to like having credit cards, having those payments, live bill to bill, and also like to take the mortgage for a really long time. We have the similar things in China, but I do feel like the extent and popularities are very different. So that's why it's a very interesting topic for me.
Mm. I think I don't know much about what happens in China because I moved away really young, right? So when I grew up in Canada, my parents always just kind of told me about getting a mortgage to pay for a house so then we can have a house to live in.
Hmm.
So I guess getting into debt is it's a very different relationship for me getting into debt. I think I don't necessarily look at it as like a negative balance when it comes to it depends on the debt though. So like if it's a mortgage, yes, it's obviously a negative money
Hmm.
that I have to owe and eventually pay back. But the way I look at mortgages is I have like this piece of physical property that I have, and I know that it's going to be valued at X. Yes, it's going to fluctuate between going up and going down, but like this house slash apartment slash whatever
Hmm.
it is that you own is always there, right? Living is going to cost you, it could cost you rent or it could cost you your mortgage. So it's kind of relatively the same thing for me when you have a mortgage or when you're living in a rented place.
Hmm.
So I don't really think about like the amount on the mortgage necessarily because the money is a fixed cost to like live, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But when it comes to credit cards or lines of credit,
Hmm.
that's a different story for me because that's more like consumption and, buying groceries, buying fun things, toys, anything like that. I think that type of debt makes it more stressful
Hmm.
compared to a mortgage debt.
Yeah, the similar like I noticed that it's very popular for the Western society to have the student loans as well. So that's something
Yes,
like
and student
we
loans.
we didn't have it in China because it's definitely much more affordable compared to here in Western society. So we don't really pay a big bill if we go to the university in China. So it's never a thing. So you don't feel like you are graduating from university and then you have to pay off your debt in like 10 or 20 years.
Okay. I think that culture is very much linked a little bit more to the US because the post-secondary education over there is so much more expensive.
Hmm.
So you mentioned that it's very different in terms of trends
Hmm.
compared to the West and the East. So like how do people say buy a house or go to uni or buy groceries when they don't have the money to do so?
In China is because we are in a very like fast developing like stages, so which means like our lives between generations can be hugely different. Most of the people in my parents' generation, they don't really worry about housing because they are given a house or they were living in a dormitory from their companies, whatever. So basically, they naturally own a house. I think the early 2000, it's when it's really taking off. It's like only 25 years from now. So it's not a long time that we really have those commercialized housing or the apartments, condos, whatever you call it. And of course, like after this years of developments, the wealth difference is getting huge now, and it's very similar to the Western society. There are many people like buying a lot of housing because we don't have a growing stock market or whatever. So the housing is the only stable investment you can get in China. And another thing is that the housing is related to the school your kids can go. So that
Mhm.
competition is very huge as well.
Interesting, interesting. That's when, because you said it didn't happen, the commercialization did not happen until early 1990s and 2000s, and that's when I basically left, right? So
Mhm.
I have zero education in that department. So it it's interesting that they didn't have to worry about housing back then. So right now, what I know, when you buy a house in or property in China, like you don't necessarily own the thing forever. You own it for like a timeshare,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like a
70 years.
okay. And what happens after that 70 years?
So, like, basically, the short answer is nobody knows yet because, from my knowledge, like, no housing after this policy introduced is reaching to the 70 years yet.
But this type of time restriction is China is not the only one that's doing it. Like
Uh-huh.
Singapore is doing it. I believe Hong Kong is probably doing it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a good system, but it's just interesting how much money is being put into it on on a given time frame.
Hmm.
And it's just interesting to maybe observe what's going to happen next after, that 70 years and after that 100 years.
Hmm.
What's going to happen in that property? Can you be transferred to like your great grandkids, or if you are lucky enough to have one, or does the government just take it back? You know what I mean? Like, do
Hmm.
they give you a refund of some sort?
my,
Yeah,
I assuming like it would be more like renewal. Like my guess is, but nobody knows. Like
yeah.
for real,
So I
getting
quickly want
guaranteed.
to
Yeah.
so I quickly want to go into this. Like, I understand that Chinese citizens are buying houses within China. But I also know
Yeah.
that a lot of Chinese citizens are also buying a lot of property internationally,
Oh yeah.
especially when the development of China that really happened in the last, I don't know, 15 years, right?
Hmm.
And that kind of money that flushed out internationally and globally, what does that mean to you in terms of what does that look like? Wh- why are people doing that instead of buying more properties in China?
Wow, that's a huge topic. So, so it can break down to several different aspects for sure. Like for the first one, it's definitely there's some super rich people are looking for a safety and stabilization of their wealth,
Yeah,
and that's very like self-explanatory. I don't want to get into the
yeah,
details, but
got it, got it.
yeah, due to like all the reasons, political and social, like, and also economic reasons, like they have those needs to transfer the money out, and not all the money is necessarily like clean. so that's the first part. Like I feel like that's involved
Hmm.
many of the money washing as well in this process. But there's
Hmm.
another group of people that, except for those super rich, like you see many of the international students in Western society, at least like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, many
Hmm.
of them are from like middle class or even lower. So
Hmm.
they do have a drive to like start a new life in the Western society, looking for higher standards of living, or higher status, because like back then we are very pro like Western in China, whether you believe or not. Like we feel like, oh, everything, not everything. Like we just want to learn more from Western societies and want to adopt those
Hmm.
lifestyle as well. So that's also another group of people in this class. They're like saying, okay, after graduation or during my study in this country, I'm going to buy some property as a way of investment, and also I'm going to stay here as my home. So that's another group of people. That's a very reasonable reason to purchase. And there's a third group of people. They're doing another round of gold rushing, in my
Mm.
opinion, because I feel like they are, like Chinese people have a very, very strong belief in the real estate market, because like how much it grows within the last 30 years. Now
Yeah.
it's going like downhills, but it was crazy for the last like 30 years how much it went up. And especially compared to like the stock market and other markets, like we, as I said, like we don't have a stabilized growing stock market in China. It's very like basically it's a casino in a way. So like
Mm.
most people won't like expect this to be a stabilized investment. And on the other hand, like because we have this gold rush, we have this like huge rapid developments, and the real estate market in China is phenomenal, and most people earn money, especially from my parents' generation. Most people earn money during this process. So
Right.
that's why we have a really strong belief in like real estate market. And that's why when they enter to another market internationally, the first thing they look is the housing, is like if they can invest some of them, and to make sure that they have the game playing ongoing again. Yeah. Does that make sense?
So this kind of, yeah, so this kind of leads to why this whole debt consumption in terms of mortgages especially been such a snowball, right? Like
Yeah.
there's been international participation in, I don't know, North America and like other parts of the world, Europe, London, whatever you want to say, right? There's been just international participation of investments of real estate, which drove up a lot of the price. And the people locally that wants to buy a house from any generations, those that already own a property early on, great. If those that don't own a property early on, not so great, right? When they're looking to purchase later. And the more ways that they're trying to get into the real estate market, the more debt that they have to kind of look into, where especially in North America, like getting a mortgage is relatively a norm to own a house or own a property, then driving up that price a lot of times kind of snowballs this like whole debt situation.
Hmm.
Plus, there's other ways of doing it as well, but like that's just my reflection.
Yeah, I do agree that international buyers are pushing the market to have more like stimulus, especially for the Canadian housing market. But also, I believe like we have more money printed, and we have more liquidity in the market for the past 10 years as well, which drive the property price higher. Or
Yeah,
like, so it's essentially inflation process. Like why people are trying to have a 2% annual like inflation is like they want to set up a positive expectation for people to believe the asset uh, will add value over time. So they have the drive to consume now or invest now, so they get the future gains. So
right.
that's the positive expectation that economics is promoting. But I do
Hmm.
feel like behind this is also implying that if you don't invest now, or if you don't invest regularly, you will not catch up. You will get behind because your salary is not increasing, your money is losing value over time because of the money printing, and also the price will go up due to the inflations. So
Hmm.
that's a scary situation. I feel like that's part of the reason why so many people are living paycheck to paycheck. It's because they're in this huge machine of pushing you to have more debts without giving you like more ability to pay them off. So the debts naturally snowballs. So you have challenges to survive in these situations. Yeah.
So compared to China, are people in less debt then? Is that what you're saying?
We're in the beginning of this circle. So I do see people are stepping into this pattern before the pandemic, basically. So when the economy is still booming and people have good expectation, and you have the young generation are really adopting this consumptionism ideology to feel like, okay, I need to buy more to feel more to show your status or to
Hmm.
show like your value in a way. And
Interesting. I've always thought that consumption in China has always been quite high, and it's like part of, I don't know if I can call it an identity, but it's very, especially those that are, wealthy, it seems like they consume in a way that it's very,
wasting, right?
yeah, wasting, inhumane, and quite rude, if I would
Yeah,
put
yeah,
it
I
out.
I agree with you. So if you put this way, I totally agree with you because I feel like that's part of related to the gold rush in a way because
Mm.
it's basically when you have a huge economic boom and so many people have so many money suddenly and they don't know how to use it, and so naturally like there's a catch up to have a more like sustainable ideology regarding like how to balance the income and spending. But in the gold rush era, if you like you're living the dream, people lose it. So I think not only China has it during the last 20 years, but also Japan had it in their like 1980s as well before the bubble is like broke. So I do feel like that's human nature. People want to showcase their status and they are traveling globally, which and that's why it's creating such a huge like bad stereotypes.
Mm. Okay. But in terms of getting into debt, right? And like working for the rest of our lives when we get ourselves into so much debt, how does that affect, in your perspective, like looking into the Western world, like how does that affect the living situation for a lot of people compared to those in China?
Mm, I do feel like it's quite unsustainable nowadays. It looks like the current system we have here now is the have the high inflation level and have the high interest rates. We have the government spending increasing as well. And at the same time, people are seduced by the consumptionism and they are forced to spend more money than they should to keep their essentials. Sorry, I'm not saying this as a criticism because I have a lot of debts
Hmm.
myself as well, and many of the credit.
Same here.
Yeah, I have my credit cards debts. I have like a long personal line of credits. I have all of them, and I even have a car loan. That's all like unnecessary. So I'm not saying like it's something like you should do better or whatever. I'm rather saying it's more like a social system or the machine that's trapping people into this.
Mm.
And for people to believe that, okay, like that's the only way to go. Like you always want something new and you always want to spend, and you can always go through payments. You don't feel like much paying, because you don't have to pay in full. So it's very unsustainable in the long run. because I don't see how
Yeah.
most people can catch up or keep up with the salaries, because salaries don't go up as much.
Something is gonna break. Something is gonna break.
Yeah.
And I'm I have no idea what is going to break, but all I can say, in my opinion, when I'm experiencing this type of, personal debt myself, I begin to wonder on things like this can't be it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Just trying to make meets end in terms of going into uni, doing a professional career that you want to do. Those that are making even six figures are just struggling to pay the
Hmm.
bills
Yeah.
is
It's
I'm not
crazy.
I'm not saying like 200,000, like if in your first 100,000 those like people are struggling to pay their bills. I understand that a lot of people would struggle even more when they're making a lot less.
Yeah.
I think it's just a personal choice in terms of, there are things for you to change in your environment so then you can not be in that situation debt-wise. But I don't think it's as easy as we can just say that you can just move to a cheaper city and live differently. You know what I mean? There's so many other factors that comes in play. You might have made all your friends for your entire life there. Your family might live there, or the city that you're living in is called home. You don't want to leave home. So there's so many different factors
Hmm. True.
to this situation that a lot of people can be like, well, you don't have to live in this expensive city or participate in so much bills, but these are the premiums that comes with living in those cities.
Hmm.
But for you to be able to manage your money better, I think the challenge, yeah, I think that's the whole challenge, right? Like being able to manage your money in a way that you feel that you can live a quality, happy life based on like a salary that you are doing or that you have.
Hmm.
And I think like that's just not necessarily, at least for me, it's not necessarily enough. I think it's only the bare minimum for a lot of people. Because if you think about it in terms of time, like how much time you're spending and how you're spending your time in the 24 hours, you go to sleep
Hmm.
for 8 hours and then you go to work for potentially 8 hours
Or
and
even more.
then, or even more, exactly. And
Yeah.
then, you have travel time, you have food time, you have potentially lounge around being lazy time, me time, or even like go to the gym. And that doesn't give you a lot of time to do the things that you want to do, right? So the only thing that I think people put themselves into debt is to be able to use that type of negative money to kind of compensate on a lot of certain things that they would like to make their life less miserable, given the time constraints that they have in a given day. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's totally making sense. I think there's two notions you actually describe. It's like one is the rat race. That's what we call it. It's like you feel like
Hmm.
there's a rat always running in this circle. So what's the name of it? Like a small one. It's adorable, and many people like keep as a pet.
Oh, are you talking about hamster?
A hamster. Yes, yes. So the rat race is basically a
Okay.
metaphor. It's the hamster always like to run around the circles through those
The
like
on the wheel.
on the wheel. Yeah, they feel like
Okay,
they're
got
running,
it.
but they're not going anywhere. That's
Hmm.
how the whole situation feels. Like you are working your ass off, and at the same time you
Hmm.
don't feel like you're gaining anything. You're just barely keeping up, you're barely surviving, and you just
Hmm.
constantly losing hope regarding how situation can be improved. So that's a big social challenges. I feel like that's one of the reasons why so many people are unhappy now. People feel the pain. So many people are seeking for change, and you see like so many of the political shifts as well. Also, one thing you hinted is that the middle class is crushing now. We used to have a huge cushion of middle class that can live a happy life just by having a job. But now you mentioned even you have like six figures, you have people around you having a great titles and great income, and I do feel like their
Yeah.
life is not as good as expected. They still have struggles to pay all the
To make
bills.
ends meet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the worst of it, like you are so afraid of losing that job. If you lose that
Hmm.
job, you will be having everything collapse in your life. So basically, what you can see, like the people are really trapped in this high income jobs. That's why it's called the golden handcuffs. They are bonded by this job. It's just feel like the possibility is shrinking for the working and middle class people in this
Hmm.
generation.
I 150% relate to that. And I'm not even working yet. Like, like I'm looking for a job. I just finished graduation, so I'm before I'm even starting work, I'm already panicking at the fact that how am I supposed to live the way that I'm kind of wanting to live? Like, you know how when you're at a certain age, when you're younger, you you're like, "Oh, at 25, I'm gonna have a house."
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah.
here we are. Wait, how are we gonna get a house at all, at mid 30s, mid 40s, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like it's it's just not it's not the same type of mentality anymore. And it's got me a little bit more panicky, if anything else. So I'm a little bit, how do I say this? I'm a little bit annoyed at the fact that putting in so much effort and time into the university,
Mhm,
getting a bachelor's, doing masters, it it doesn't it's not enough, Like you
mhm,
need to potentially just do more. And even if I were to be in a higher senior position, I'm just looking at my friends' incomes who are in six figures and stuff. They aren't like, I'm not saying they're not happy. They are relatively happy, but in reality, they're probably not as happy as I would think they should be.
mhm.
Wow, that was terrible English. But
It's understandable. It's great.
but you know what I mean? It's just like, wait, what the hell happened in life for like the past 15 years? Things just got crazy expensive to the point
And
where $100 in grocery is like absolutely nothing in your bag.
mhm.
So this is the ponder. This is the ponder.
I feel like the Western society is that people were promised a dream of opportunity and security in a way. So feel like that, okay, after retirement, you can have an enjoyable elderly life with no worries about your income and everything. And in exchange, you're going to work for 40 years and you buy a lot of expensive stuff during the process. So basically, that's the agreement you have with the society expectations.
Mm.
But this promise is fading away because people are struggling to find a job, and people have a job are suffering.
Hmm.
And also, even you manage to be retired, you may be worried
Hmm.
about the pension will go bankrupt or it doesn't cover the daily expenses you may have.
That's scary, right? Like when you're like when you're retired at, say, in the next 10 years, and if our markets continues to be like this, our pensions and the middle class slash lower class people who saved up all this money for the pensions and stuff will probably have to live even more frugal than
Hmm.
during their time when they were making money.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily okay because, you've worked all your life, like this is the time for you to go do your thing and have some fun and travel the world. But there, I don't see that being an option. I do not see that
Hmm.
to be something to look forward to.
So there's a notion, it's called the replacement rate. So basically, like after retirement,
Hmm.
how much income cash flow you will have compared to before your retirement. So that's a rate in comparison.
Yeah.
So I feel like most people, if we only rely on the pension, the rate can be really low.
Mhm.
So which means like even though you have some pension, you cannot have the same quality of life as you expected. It's scary because it forces everyone to have more savings. And even though people have savings and feel like most of the savings are in cash based, it will
Mm.
naturally lose value over time as well due to inflation and all that stuff.
So, with all this debt that is happening, what is it that you're currently doing to mitigate this yourself?
Well, I'm learning from the people to invest, at least
Hmm.
keep up with inflation and everything, and to make sure that my assets don't lose value over time. So I keep the same purchasing power or even have some accumulations. But I think that's something very risky for most people because I do some high risk investments, and also it's not something we learned from schools and everything.
Yeah.
So basically, we
No.
have to be convincing ourselves to have the first step. And I don't feel like that's fair to all the people. And I don't even know if my method will be working because I'm in the process. I'm in the hopes that it will work. It's basically a huge gamble.
Yeah, a lot of people want it like right now, right? Kind of thing, which is also not really realistic, unfortunately. But at the same time, I kind of think about the work that we're putting ourselves into in terms of getting into debt, the money that we're paying back for is kind of switched from the money that you should be putting aside to saving is instead like being put towards your debt. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's kind of mm, in a way it's really really tough to be in that situation. And I think one of the things that I thought to myself was there's nothing I can do in terms of the system and in terms of, all the past choices that I have done to get to where I am at this point in terms of debt and money and all that stuff. But there is definitely still hope out there
Mhm.
if you are willing to make a change in terms of how you want to spend your time to potentially create another source of income, to create another source of investment, and create another source of way for you to kind of get out of this whole debt situation. And there's something that kind of resonates with me really well is that you could not do anything about it and just continue the way that you're doing.
Hmm.
That option, I would say, is hard. And then the other option is that you can do something about it to get yourself out of it, right? To create
Hmm.
another source of income, to do whatever it is that you need to do that you think that might be benefit to you to get yourself out of debt and then eventually a little bit more money and more wealth 10, 15, 20 years later. That's also hard.
Yeah, it's very.
So it's so choose your hard is what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
It's really about that. I think it's and it takes a lot of grit and tenacity to kind of do it. And unfortunately, I can't say that I have parents to teach me anything like this, other than there is a lot of resources on the internet that people are willing to share a lot of this information.
Hmm.
At the same time, I'm not saying it's not true, and it's really hard to kind of practice it at the same time because they're trying to do it also for some sort of benefit for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. From my perspective, the trap or this machine is running is because it's so tempting. The philosophy behind this is to get you into debt and to get into the consumptionism, and you have to work your whole life to create a value for the society.
Yeah.
And it's very tempting because it's all catering to your human natures. Like people want like faster gains, people want to show off their like values or differences. People want to prove their accomplishments, and people want to get away from like the fear and insecurities. But if you just flow with everything, you don't pick your hardness, as like Jayden mentioned, it's really hard to break the cycles. And also you mentioned about like the online resources. I discovered this show in the Western society. I think it's from like Dave Ramsey. It's very surprising. Like I see someone doing a show that actually teaches people to do the budgeting. And for me, it's a showcase regarding how much the Western society is rooted in the debt in a way, at least for the North American
Mm,
uh, societies.
how much education is needed on that part, right? Because in school, we don't really learn about these things. And
Yeah.
that's why there's such a huge audience. And I know that me and you are not alone in this situation, feeling, we have to get into debt to be able to go to school, be able to participate in many different things that we want to be able to participate in, getting a mortgage, own a car, etc., etc.
Hmm.
But these are the things that people don't know, and those that are around them, those are the type of word of mouth education, and like this is how you're going to get X, right? But in reality, the type of education that is needed in a financial terms is so non-existent in a formal setting. It makes it hard for those that are consuming the content to pick like which one works. And I'm not saying none of them works, and I'm gonna say a lot of them do work, but it's also about how are you going to use those methods, those techniques, those budgeting ways that fits into your life, right? What fits
Hmm.
into yours might not fit into mine. So, because our values are different, what we value different things, we hold a different standard to different parts of our lives. So, it's very interesting to know that there's a huge market for this because right now social media there's like all over. It's all over. Like in terms of finances, in terms of investing, and books, countless of books that talks about these things.
Mhm.
But a lot of these matters comes from a lot of the things that we just it's kind of out of it's kind of out of our control in a certain way. But when there are things that is within our control, we should try to be able to be a little bit more in control, especially with our own ways of spending money.
Mhm. I agree. I feel like I totally agree. It's a personal choice and also the personal vision regarding who you are and how you see this world. Maybe.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I didn't have a student loan. My family covers everything and I didn't have any debt. But here I am. I'm getting more debts over time because I buy
Yeah.
so many ridiculous stuff or whatever I don't need. So it's essentially as a human choice. Like it no matter like where you're coming from, like what's the situation. It's essentially your choice that making things happen. And the vision is so important because it relates to me that if you watch like Dave Ramsey's show, it will show you a method to clear up the debt and start to accumulate the wealth. And by theory, like over 25 or 30 years, you can become a millionaire. But it also
Mhm.
comes to how you see this might mean, because I'm not sure if a millionaire in 30 years is something like still holds its buying power and everything. So the word
Well, it
is,
doesn't today. It doesn't today. At
yeah,
least in my opinion, it doesn't today
yeah,
because, where we live in certain parts of the world, expensive cities in the world, a lot of people enjoy living in these cities because they're, prime. They're great. They have
yeah.
lots to offer, lots of people to be, and that's where all the money is. But $1 million doesn't really do much in today's world. Like, sure, it'll to be honest, like if you were to win $1 million right now,
Hmm.
for me, like it's going into paying off debt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
not for
That's
me to
true.
go like spend luxuriously. It's more about like it's gonna go into debt first and then see what's left
Yeah,
kind of situation. So that's what like $1 million would do,
yeah,
at least.
I agree. You see, there's many things are in a similar nature that you have to basically predict the future to understand how it may make sense to you. Because you see, like this AI thing is breaking out, and you see like it's being more capable over time, and you see
Hmm.
the resources of the education is become more available than ever. You start to question what's the meaning of the degrees if you don't really want to be a real expert or the professions that requires a degree, like for example doctors will, or like those professions, because like
Yeah.
feel like with the technology matures, the education or the degrees is de-evaluating over time.
I think the only thing about that though is thing that's holding purpose of education, I think. It depends on if you want to work for a company and if the company is seeking that type of certification, formal education
Yeah,
in your background.
yeah. So yeah, so basically for the education is changing, for the real estate is changing as well. So we have like more people are working remotely, and we call it a generation of digital nomads. And you see the challenges in this commercial real estate is facing, it's crumbling in a way. So that's why you see so many politicians or business owners are calling people back to the office, or at least back to those downtown offices. And
Mhm.
how it may affect the value of real estate in 10 or 20 years, right? Those are all unknowns. So those are the questions I feel like is really based on your personal judgment and really based on how you see this world is going to be. I do feel like the world is facing a huge changes, and it could be the opportunities for us to break the cycles and to regain our controls of our life.
Yeah, yeah. I'm more like I don't know what this change will look like, and I'm a little bit more scared. I want to be optimistic about it,
Hmm.
and I want to be more hopeful, but there's definitely always a side of me is that in human nature, there's a lot of, I guess, greed is part of it, and everybody wants, they all have to be able to take care of themselves first, right? And that's where the bad portion of it comes from, for me, I guess.
Yeah. What's the solution I can propose?
Choose your heart.
And also do your best in the current way you know will be working, like minimize your
Mm,
spending, like have the budget, and don't
hmm.
fall in the trap of consumptionism, and to have a healthy amount of debt that you can afford, and to always ensure you have positive cash flow, and to make more efforts to developing more resources of income. Those all be helping. uh, yeah, and also thinking about some like long-term investment options that you feel like can beat the inflation and everything for the future. I think those are viable steps people can take, I guess.
They do take a long time, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Are
thinking about it is tiring.
Yes, so best wishes, I guess.
Okay, well, thank you so much for tuning into Pondering Pandas. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends, leave us a comment, give us a 5-star review wherever you are listening to this podcast. We can be found in all platforms. Your comments, your shares, and your review of a 5-star would really help us grow. We appreciate you pondering with us. We'll see you on the next episode.
See you and thank you.
Bye.
Bye.